Alright, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to start to learn the basics of CSS. And so I have our trusty resource up that I left you off with in the previous page. And I clicked on Styling the Web, Introduction to CSS. So, how does CSS work? Well, let's read this information real quick. So CSS, Cascading Style Sheets, allows you to create great looking web pages. But how does it work under the hood? This article explains what CSS is, how the browser turns HTML into a document object model, DOM, how CSS is applied to parts of the DOM, some very basic syntax examples, and what code is used to actually include our CSS in our web page. Okay, so what is CSS? CSS is a language for specifying how documents are presented to users, how they are styled and laid out, etc. So, for example, this page was all built in CSS. If we were to go in and eliminate the CSS, all this would look like the page that you built in the previous section. That's what CSS is. CSS, how does it affect HTML? Web browsers apply CSS rules to a document to affect how they are displayed. A CSS rule is formed from a set of properties and a selector. So what are the properties? Properties which have values set to update how the HTML content is displayed. For example, I want my element's width to be 50% of its parent element and its background to be red. A selector which selects the elements you want to apply to the updated property value. 2, for example, I want to apply my CSS rule to all paragraphs in my HTML document. So a selector, there's 3 types of selectors. You have elements, which are HTML elements. You have IDs, and you have classes. So classes, you can give a class to, for example, the body, not the body, but the H1, we could give it a class of hello world, okay? And then we could give the paragraph tag the same one. We could give that hello world. And then if we went into the CSS and we typed in dot hello world and then gave it a color of blue, background yellow, and a border of 1 pixel solid black, then it would grab the H1 and the paragraph and give both of those that property, which is what you're calling for. Now an ID is similar to an element. You can only put it on one element. So if you do H1, you could give the H1 an ID of hello world, and it would be H1 hashtag hello world, and then whatever the properties are. So that's the basics of CSS. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to go into the code now, and I'm going to show you how to set all that up, and then we're going to come back here to finish up this video, and then we'll have more information on the next video. Alright, so let's go into Sublime Text, and this was where we left off in the previous video, building out the HTML, and this is a perfect place to start coding CSS. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in the head tag below the CSS, and we're going to comment this out. This is internal CSS. Now I highly am against this only because it's highly recommended and good practice to code your CSS on a separate file, because these pages tend to get long. I mean, you can see what we've been doing here. We have almost 100 lines of code. We have 98 lines of code because of all the spacing. So imagine trying to style this and you come back and you have 200 lines of HTML code. That's ridiculous. HTML should never be that long because it's structure. You're building just the basic structure, okay? So I'm going to give this the left bracket and type in style, give it the right bracket, let's do left and the slash to close it, and then we're going to return 3 times, okay? And we're going to line 17, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in H1, I'm going to type in the left curly brace. By holding shift, you hit the left curly brace, it's going to grab both. Okay, now if we hit enter, Now we can start typing our properties. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in color. We're going to do red, color, colon, red, okay? And let's give it a background of purple. We'll just do some wild styling here, okay? And always, always, always close your property. Okay, right click, open in the browser, and now you can see our really ugly looking CSS. So we have red text and a purple background. Now if we went back and we did H2, we're going to return twice, type in H2, left curly brace, hold shift, left curly brace, hit enter, and now we're going to do, let's do margin top 20 pixels. Okay. Oh, that's not 20. That's, there we go, 20 pixels. Okay. Now let's go back. And I don't think that worked. Let me see here. Okay, let's give it a color of green. Let's do that first. Okay, let's save that. And if you hit Alt Tab, it'll go, if you hold Alt and hit Tab, you can tab between your windows. Okay, so there we go. Now the text is green, and I'm going to make this 220. Let's right click and open that in the browser. Okay, the margin worked. So what we did was we did margin top from this element down to this element. This was the element that we were pushing. So we were pushing this away from the H1. So the H2 is 220 pixels from the top of the H1. Okay. H3. Let's do background black with 200 pixels, 300 pixels. Let's do 300 pixels. Color blue. Okay. Control S to save, right click, open in the browser, and there you go. This is a H3 tag, and we gave it a width of that. So you see what it can do. This is just very basic stuff, obviously, but I'm going to do one more thing. We're going to do margin left. Actually, let's do text align. Text align center. Hit enter, Control S to save, right click, open in the browser, and why didn't that work? Let me see here. Nope, it didn't. Oh, it did work. Because we gave it a background. So here's the thing. I thought it didn't work for some reason. When I opened it in the browser, I'm like, it's not working. But actually it is, because if you see here, we gave it a width of 300 pixels, and it put it in the middle of the width. So it's exactly in the middle of, from the left and the right. So that's correct. It's in the middle. So that worked. So now in the next video, we're going to continue learning more about CSS, and we're also going to learn more in here about different rules and things that they have in here. And I'm looking forward to showing you that. So I'll see you in the next video where we're going to learn more CSS. All right, welcome back. In this video, we're going to continue talking about CSS. And in the previous video, we used internal style sheet. So what we did was we created the style tag here, as you can see in this example, and we started writing out our code based on that. Now what I want to show you is in inline styles, which is similar to what we were doing before, but instead of putting it up here, you're basically going to add it to that line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here, and I'm actually going to copy all of this code. I think you can, nope, I guess that doesn't work. All right, grab the H1 tag, right click, hit copy. We're going to go into Sublime Text into our project, and I'm going to add this at the bottom of the page. So we're going to comment this out. This is inline CSS. Okay. There you go. And so what we did was we did H1 style equals color blue, background color of yellow, border 1 pixel solid black. Hello world. Okay, so now let's right click and open this. And you can see right here, hello world, the width, the color, the border, the background color, and then the color of the text. Okay, so that's inline styling. But I'm going to persuade you, try to anyway, to not use this method or this method up here at a very minimum rate, if you can help it. The reason why is because what I told you before. You see how we have 121 lines of code? That was from just adding a little bit of code here. And the reason why you have so many lines here is because of all the spacing. But the spacing also makes it easier to read. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the HTML folder here. We're going to right click, we're going to click new folder, we're going to type in CSS, we're going to hit enter to save it. And inside of here, and actually let's rename this lowercase CSS and then hit enter. Okay, and then if we go into the CSS folder, if we go into the CSS folder and right click and click new file, okay, and if we hit Control S, if we hit Control S and we type in main.css, okay, and we go back to test.html, and let's go to the top of the page, and there's main.css, and we type in body, okay, and we do the curly brace, so we do shift left curly brace, return, and let's do color red, font family Roboto. Yes, I said Roboto. And then let's do font size 2Ms and save that. Now let's right click in our test.html file, open it in the browser, and you're going to see that all the text has gotten bigger because what we did was we gave the body a property in our main.css of font family Roboto, color red, and the font size is 2Ms. So all the tags are going to be red except for the ones that we did inline, and this is why I'm showing you this. Anything you did here in the internal CSS or the inline will overwrite the external. Okay? So that's why you see hello world is bigger, but the properties have stayed the same because it was internal and inline. This was inline and this was internal. Okay? This was internal. The purple background was internal, and I gave it a color of red, so it already had that property. But these two, because they were internal, overwrite external. So inline is first, internal is second, and external is third in terms of permissions. So the top would be inline, internal, external. Okay? So that's a great way to see that. The other thing too with the external is it's easier to troubleshoot because if you don't have it linked, the CSS isn't going to show up. So you'll know right away what's going on. See right here, failed to load resources. So it's looking for test.css. So let's delete that from our file here, and I'm going to show you what it's going to do here in a second. Let's see here. Okay, so right here, let's go right up. We're going to click right here, left click and drag up to there, hit delete, and Control S. We'll right click, open in the browser, right click, inspect, and we're going to go to console, and now there's no errors. And that's a great thing because all the code is clean and it's running the way it's supposed to. So fantastic work on that. So in the next video, I'm going to teach you some more CSS. We're going to talk about pseudo selectors and a couple other things, and I will see you there. All right, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to talk more about CSS, and we're going to talk about pseudo classes and pseudo elements. Okay, so let's go to that. I'm going to open that in a new tab. So if you right click, Click open a new link. Click there. Okay, so pseudo classes. So what are pseudo classes? A pseudo class is a keyword presented by a colon added to the end of a selector to specify what you want to style the selected element, and only when they are in a certain state. So for example, if you wanted to do a hover, you would do colon hover. You can do visited, valid, target, scope, root, write, required, read write, read only, out of range, optional, etc., etc. So there's a lot of pseudo classes, okay? They have about 30 of them. But the ones that we're going to talk about and use is we're going to use hover, what was the other one? Active. These are the two that I'm going to use. So this is the fun thing about coding as well, is there's so much information out there and there's so many things being added all the time, is you can go in and you can start fiddling with it and add these pseudo selectors to your file and really have fun with it. And you also have this resource where you can click on it and it will show you what it is. So for example, active, you would do anchor, colon, active, and then the color. And it will, this link will turn lime when you click on it. So if you did a link color blue, that would be when it's unvisited. So like this, that would be the result. When you hover over it, the background color is yellow. Active, it would be lime. So let's click on it. There you go. So it turns lime. And then when it was visited, it turns purple. So those are different states and different pseudo selectors that you can use. We're going to be using hover and active a lot in this project that we're going to be doing in the next couple of videos. So I just wanted to show you the basics here, and the active and the hover are very important pseudo selectors because you're going to use those a lot in the navigation. For example, this right here, this element that they have with the underlined, that is probably, let's inspect it real quick and just see what they did. So if you click on HOV, click active, let's do hover. Okay, so hover, visited, what's visited? Nope, okay, I guess not. They just show that when you, I guess when you just hover down, it's an effect. Yep, it's an effect. Oh, I see what they're doing. So what they're doing is when you go to example, it highlights it, and then specifications, it highlights, and browser compatibility. So both of these are showing, so it pops up here. So when you hover over it, it turns white. So that's a pseudo selector that they're using. And then when you go off of that, it just goes back to the normal color. So that's a great example too, is to see how that works. Now let me go back to how CSS works real quick. And we're going to do selectors. Let's click on selectors. Okay, so the basics. So selectors, there's simple selectors, which is a class and an ID. Attribute selectors match one or more elements based on their attribute values. Pseudo classes match one or more elements that exist in certain state. Pseudo elements match one or more parts of content that are in a certain position. Combinators, these are not exactly selectors themselves, but ways of combining two or more selectors. We're going to be doing this a lot in the next video, so I'll show you that. Multiple selectors, again, there is no separate selectors. The idea is that you can put multiple selectors on the same CSS rule, separated by commas, to apply a single set of declarations to all the elements selected by those selectors. And the reason that they do that is the common word in coding is do not repeat yourself. So if you have a property that you wanted to give to 5 elements, instead of typing out h1 and then the property and then h2 and then the property, you would do h1 comma h2 h3 h4 h5 all with commas, and then you would write out the property. That way it condenses your code, and if you're just giving it that one property, it's not going to hurt anybody. So in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to get started on building our project. We're going to build a 5-page website with HTML, and then we're going to style it with CSS. And so what we're going to do is we're going to build out every page, and then we're going to style every page. So we'll build the home page, then we'll style it. Then we'll build the services page, then we'll style it. We'll build the portfolio page, and then we'll style it, etc., etc. So in the next video, I will see you there, and let's get started on our project. All right, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk a little more about CSS, and then in the next video, we're going to start a project. All right? So in the last video, I was talking about simple selectors, attribute selectors, pseudo classes, elements, pseudo elements, multiple selectors, combinators, etc., etc. So all these are very important. And so what we're going to do is we're going to click on pseudo classes and pseudo elements, because I want to go over this real quick. We went over the pseudo classes, but we haven't gone over the pseudo elements. So that's what I want to look at right now. So they have pseudo elements, are very much like pseudo classes, but they have differences. They are keywords. This is time preceded by 2 colons. This time preceded by 2 colons that can be added to the end of selectors to select a certain part of an element. So you can do, so they all have very specific behaviors and interesting features, but digging into them all in detail is beyond our scope for now. That's true. But let's look at what they have here. So all elements with an attribute of href, which values start with HTTP, will be added an arrow after its content to indicate it's an external link. So basically what they're doing is, if you were to add this tag, okay, not this tag, but a pseudo element, basically what you're doing is you're creating an extra effect. And what they're doing here is all the elements, so you see how they commented this out, all elements with the attribute href, which values start with HTTP, will be added an arrow after its content to indicate it's an external link. So what they're doing is they're adding an icon to it to show that it's an external link. And the only way to do that is through the pseudo element, because it gives you the ability to customize this content. And that's just one example. So that's after. You can do before, you can do first letter, first line, selection, and backdrop. And so I just wanted to share this with you so you can check it out and investigate a little bit more. What I'm going to do now is we're going to get ready for the project. So in the next video, we're going to create a 5-page website, which will be your project. And then we're also going to style the 5-page website. So I'm very excited to get started on that, because this is the fun part. You know. All right, so I'll see you in the next video.